Welcome to the Continuous Revenue Marketer podcast, where the most influential marketers in the world are sharing their insights and lessons on the critical topic chief executives must address daily: how to deliver profitable revenues consistently for their organization through customer growth and lifetime value optimization. And most importantly, what strategies, tactics, and methodologies are they employing to achieve these goals with a high ROI on their marketing spend? Hi, I'm Russell Kern, CEO and founder of Kern, an Omnicom agency, and I'm joined with my co-host and producer, Elliot Dennis. And today we have back as a special guest, Shiona McDougall, who is the Global Chief Strategy Officer for WRAP. She shared on our last session her views about the cookieless world and her love for the zombie apocalypse. And most importantly, what I took away from that first interview with Shiona was the humanality, the rawness, the emotionality of which is exposed during a zombie apocalypse movie, and why she loves the genre, and really what it means for brands as we can no longer lazily target and retarget our digital without having cookies, and that we're going to have to know our audience and know them deeply so that we can be highly relevant and highly personalized, and that we now have technology to make that happen. So Shiona, welcome back, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd like to, you are, as a strategist, have been responsible to create a very unique self-assessment. I'd like you, before you talk about this assessment, to put some context of why you created it, what is it for, and then what are the dimensions of it? Why is it important for marketers to maybe take this self-assessment?
So I think first and foremost, I'm a very simple marketeer. We always have to start with, well, where are we today, and where do we need to get to, and therefore what do we need to do to get there? And so my favorite tool in my strategic toolbox is always a maturity framework, because that's a way of navigating with a client, where are we today and where do we want to get to, and then how do we get from A to B actually then becomes relatively straightforward. But it is a way of aligning on language, aligning on understanding, and sometimes actually aligning within a client organization, because not all client organizations are simple with perfect information. It might be that one part of the organization knows something and then another part of the organization knows something else. And so it's about bringing as much of that knowledge to the fore using a maturity framework.
Got it. So the assessment is a maturity framework. Does that help? Basically, it's a tool to help a marketer or chief marketer understand where they are in their journey.
Absolutely.
But I want to propose, in their journey to what? What are they? What is this? What are they maturing to? What are they self-evaluating? What is the context we're talking about here?
So it is a way of measuring how sophisticated the marketing of any brand or business is relative to what is possible, and ultimately relative to what their peers and competitors are doing as well. And the reason that's important is because what is possible is changing quite quickly. And the ability to do personalized marketing at scale has significantly changed over even just the last 5 years, let alone the last 10 or 15. And brands actually are often struggling to keep up, with what technology they need, what ways of working do they need, what types of marketing should they be doing in market, and how can they improve their return on investment from the communications that they create. And that's a constant struggle for every business. And so giving them a really simple questionnaire, essentially, that helps navigate where they are today and where they could be in the future, and therefore what steps can they take in order to move forward towards better personalization, better content, more relevant, more impactful content, and ultimately better return on investment.
So let's tease them. And then Elliot, I'll throw it over to you, which is give them the sense of the dimensions that they're going to be able to score within the assessment, so that that a listener would say, oh, I got to take this thing. Let's talk about the three big dimensions that they're going to uncover.
So there are three dimensions that we've organized this matrix and framework into, and they are customer, context, and content. Deliberately all C's, because if it's not alliterative, it's not marketing, right?
Yeah, of course.
So the first one is customer, and this is about how well do you truly understand and have the ability to respond to your understanding of customers' needs, lives, behaviors, attitudes, motivations, personalities, like all of the things that we are now able to know about customers. And there are so many different ways in which you can understand and respond to those individual nuances for each customer, that actually figuring out, well, where are you today is not as easy as it might sound. So that's the first one. The second one is then context. And that's about how do you show up as a brand, and what is the world in which your brand shows up in, and how do you effectively and efficiently respond to the ever-changing environment that your brand lives in. And that's, yes, partly about kind of media placements and how your brand shows up from a kind of paid media perspective, but it is also about culture and making sure and understanding how your brand shows up relative to the culture and the cultural nuances that are important to the customers that you're serving. So that's the second area, is context. And then the third one is content. And often marketeers jump to content because that's the thing that it feels easiest to change. You can mess around with headlines and you can move the picture and move the logo, make the logo bigger. You know, that feels like the easy thing. But actually how well you craft that visual messaging and copy messaging to most efficiently move your business forward at scale has become exponentially more complex when you're talking about individualized communications. And again, in today's world, it is possible to not just create one ad, but actually to create one ad that then turns into 100,000 specific for specific customer ads, that actually understanding where a brand is today on their ability to craft personalized communications at scale is a really important factor in being able to deliver against the needs of the customer and the context. So those are the three dimensions that we measure in the first instance.
Thank you. Elliot?
Yeah, you've talked a bit about the three areas and why they're important to marketers. And I personally took the assessment twice, thinking about myself in two different sides of the spectrum, if you will, on two different clients I've worked with along their journey. And so I will put the link to the assessment in the episode description for me to play around on their own. So I was hoping we could dive a bit more into the questions that you selected to get to the assessment, as I found some pretty interesting. So what were some of your favorite questions and some of yours that I thought were very important to ask, and why did you ask those in the way that you did? So essentially, can you give us some of the sausage making behind how you get to the end score through the assessment?
Yeah, so there in each of the pillars, so in customer, context, and content, there are actually 4 layers of questioning. And the first layer is almost like a kind of a benchmarking layer. It's the one that asks the kind of high level question about your maturity in that pillar. And you know, they're relatively straightforward, and they have a little bit more nuanced language. They're a little bit more descriptive in the language, so that you can kind of immediately get a feel for where do you sit, and it's on a spectrum of 1 to 5. So you choose, on a spectrum of 1 to 5, where do you sit based on the descriptions at each of the numbers. And then underneath that are 3 more layers of questioning, and there is some crossover in some of the questions, and it doesn't actually matter if you answer one of the questions one way and give yourself, let's say, a score of 3, and then you answer another question which is kind of the same but worded a little bit differently. It doesn't matter if you then just score yourself a 2. There is a weighting in some of the scoring and the way that we work the scoring, because ultimately you get an overall score out of 100. And there is a little bit of weighting built into that based on how you answer the questions. But the point is to start to draw out the specifics of what makes you a score of a 3 on the first customer score, and then what are the specifics that make that up. So it's a little bit like so for example, in personality questionnaires, you sometimes get asked the same question multiple times, and that's not to catch you out, that's to just double check. So when you say you've got this and you're a score of a 3, does that mean you also have this and this and this and this? And it's just about just getting the robustness of the scoring. So each of the pillars covers the same things a few times over in slightly different ways, and that's because actually the nature of this task is vast and enormous, and we've managed to get it down to 12 questions, so 4 in each of the 3 pillars. And believe me, that took quite a lot of wrestling. And wrestling internally within the business. We have opinions from all over the place as to how the questions should be put, and which questions should be included. And so we've narrowed it down to these 12 through actually quite a lot of trial and error and some testing with real live clients, working out what do they not understand, how do they find it difficult, what doesn't make any sense. So we've honed it down to these 12 questions, and we may hone it again further in the future. But the point is that actually it's fairly straightforward and simple to answer the 12 questions, and it shouldn't take more than probably 30 minutes tops, although you can do it probably in about 5.
Got it. So now the $1 million question is, okay, I spend either 5 minutes or 30 minutes. I have myself or my entire team score ourselves. What is the score going to reveal, and what do I do with it?
Okay, so the score will tell you where you're at today. And what we usually do once you've scored yourself with your team or to the best of your ability is that's the starting point for a conversation. That's the starting point for a conversation about, okay, so if this is where we're at today, what's next? Should we improve our sophistication on the customer side of things? Should we start to look at predictive analytics, for example, if that's not something you're doing already? Or should we put our energy and resources into content automation tools and technologies? And I think there is never a straightforward answer to that question, but at the very least, what this questionnaire does is sets you up with the tools to have the conversation, either internally with an agency, however you want to have that conversation. I think the point of it is it's a starting point for conversation about what's next. And it allows for the removal of the paralysis that often exists within organizations, because there are so many possibilities of things to do next. Actually, it structures the conversation about, well, which of the things should we do first?
Yes. So what I found, Elliot, I'll throw it back to you, is having take the assessment is that it at least allows an organized method to have a discussion around. Yeah. We can go through each of the answers in the total score, and then the team can ask themselves, what are the most important things that will move the business forward?
Yeah.
Where is because I know we talked about it when we were looking at the blueprint a couple episodes ago, that one of the things that a marketer has to ask is where's the low hanging fruit? Where are the quick wins? And where are the long wins that need the time and investment to transform the business? And it's a both and, not an either or, but you need to have a structure to be able to start to say, well, what about this? What about, as you say, predictive analytics? What about collecting more first party data? What about how we're using data? How is this going to change? Where are we not doing anything where we're leaving money on the table because of how we've been? This at least creates the opportunity for an effective conversation, as you say.
Yeah. And usually, one of the great things we do as a result of a client taking this assessment is we workshop with them, and we workshop the possibilities of, well, what next? And that usually results in a prioritization matrix of all of the hundreds and millions of possibilities that come out of a workshop. You prioritize everything based on impact that it's likely to have to the organization and ease of implementation. So, it might be that actually the next step in one of the things is actually you have to invest $5 million in a piece of technology, which is going to make, it's going to be difficult to implement because most organizations have complicated procurement methods, whereas there might be some very simple quick wins, but they all have to be on the table and go into a kind of list of things to do, organized by ease of implementation and impact.
I love that simple two-piece scoring: ease and impact. It just takes away all the issue. Easy or hard, expense, big impact, little impact. Elliot, did you have a follow-up you want to ask before we wrap up?
That was actually my question, and Shioni kind of hit the nail right on the head there on how this might be able to help CMOs transform the organization. And my one question is, you mentioned how you suggest potentially multiple team members in an organization take the assessment, and that was one of the interesting results I had. How there was similarities, yet a little differences when I answered the questions with my kind of different caps on, if you will, thinking through how maybe a chief strategy officer versus a chief technology officer versus a chief marketing officer might think a little differently, but similar on there. And the results weren't too far apart, but there were some nuances when it came to the different results. So maybe any closing thoughts on, how beneficial and some insights a team might get from how they could each take the assessment and maybe exactly kind of come to an agreement on some of those quick wins, or realize, this is a larger problem than we thought. So just some takeaway questions on maybe some tactical learnings they could have if you come at this from different perspectives.
Yeah, so I would always recommend having as many perspectives as possible, because you don't know what you don't know, and actually someone else in your organization probably does know. And one of the almost like the side effects of having done this exercise with clients has been actually to bring together a siloed organization, to bring together parts of organizations that have not previously worked particularly well together. But in today's world, marketing is not a solo sport. You have to connect up with other parts of the organization. It might be the technology team. It might be often a website team sits entirely separately from a marketing team. Often, there are whole teams of people scurrying away doing great work that nobody knows about within an organization. So the most important thing is to have as many people who can affect change as possible, because the reality is that together, all of those different silos within an organization can affect change, and it is more likely to be significant, impactful change if they work together. It also means that they then have a shared agenda. So not only do they find out things about their own organization, but you then create a shared agenda. The list of to-dos that comes out of a workshop around a marketing IQ scoring is a shared list of to-dos. And that shared agenda goes quite a long way to breaking down silos and helping organizations to move forward and again, get out of the paralysis that often exists because everyone is working to slightly different targets and goals and agendas.
Nice. So Shiona, I want to just recap the time that we've had together during our 2 episodes, which is we're moving to a cookieless world, and so we cannot retarget lazily. That brands have to realize they need to own their first party data so that they could speak to the heart of their audience in authentic matters. That there are new technologies that are now allowing these brands to speak at high personalized levels with high relevancy to their values, to their beliefs, to where they are in ways that weren't possible before. And so the cookieless apocalypse is, hey, the world's about to change, and that when taking the assessment, if they would, as chief marketer would take the time to do the assessment and their team, they could then determine how are we going to transform our go-to-market strategies, our data collection methodologies, our communication strategies, so that we are appealing to the heart and the head and winning share of wallet. Would you say that's an appropriate summary, or do you want to add anything to that?
I couldn't have said it better myself.
That's so kind of you. Well, I am really grateful for your time and your wisdom. I encourage all of our listeners to look on the description link to take the assessment, the MQI assessment, and we look forward to a workshop. And as Shiona said, let's workshop it and discuss what's easy and what has high impact for the organization, so we can get some wins. And so on behalf of Elliot and myself, I want to thank you for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our other future episodes. Until next time, I'm Russell Kern.
The Continuous Revenue Marketer has been brought to you by Kern, an Omnicom precision marketing agency that helps Fortune 500 companies increase revenue from customer acquisition to loyalty through personalization at speed and scale. For more information, please visit kernagency.com.